Well, thank you everybody for joining us on the very first Paddock to Planning webinar for land use conflict. My name is Helen Squires and I'm part of the New South Wales DPI Agricultural Land Use Planning team. We've been really overwhelmed with how many people have registered for today's event. We've got over 170 people registered for today. So just a couple of little housekeeping matters before we kick off. The webinar will be recorded today and will be available on the project website later on, should you need to go back and catch up on some things. I'd ask everybody to stay on mute, given the number of people that we have on board today. There'll be an opportunity to ask questions throughout the forum. I do ask you to do this in two different ways. Either put your question in the chat function there, or down the bottom in the reactions. If you could please raise your hand and one of the team members will ask you to come off mute and deliver your question. So let's dive in. We'd like to first begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the many lands in which we are attending this meeting on today. We pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and extend those respects to any First Nations people attending this meeting today. So a quick outline of how the forum will roll today. I'll pass over to Wendy Goodburn and she will give you a rundown on the Paddock to Planning project and what we were hoping to achieve and what councils can get out of the forums. I'll then pass over to Tamara Prentice and she will explain the Rural Land Strategy Guideline and provide an update on the State Significant Agricultural Land mapping project as well. We'll then hear from Selena Stillman and she'll give us an update on the education program that's being developed as well. Following that, we'll get into the meat of why we're here today and we'll break out into small groups and discuss land use conflict issues and solutions. But before we jump into the overview by Wendy, just thought we'd start off with a little poll. Why did you attend today? We're interested to know whether it was a personal interest, whether the boss made you come. So there's only a handful that came along just because the boss told them to come, but it's great to see that, well, unfortunately land use conflict is a major concern for many of us here, but this is why we're starting off the forum and why we have kicked it off. We just want to touch base with you guys and just see if this is the first time that you've engaged with DPI Ag or whether you've worked with us before. So it's a little bit under 50-50, so it's great to see that those that have worked with us before are back and weren't scared off. But it's also really nice to see that those that haven't had the opportunity to engage with us are coming and being part of this program. I'd like to now hand over to Wendy Goodburn and she will take you through the forum. Thanks, Wendy.
Thanks, Helen, and good morning, everyone. The Paddock to Planning Forum is a new forum that we've set up to support councils dealing with land use conflict. And because we know that councils across New South Wales deal with a lot of land use conflict issues, agricultural land use conflict issues. And there's not really any central point of reference to assist in resolving the conflicts. So, you know, there can be similar cases in different areas and they can have very different outcomes. And it's hard to improve the professional and industry knowledge and improve decision making where there's not any sort of centralised database or information to draw on. So the webinars offer a structured mechanism to share experiences and knowledge both between councils and also with DPI to assist us in informing our policies and guidelines and our other work. So mainly the two key purposes are improving the management of land use conflicts and also supporting the delivery and implementation of key actions that come out of this forum. The forum actually was developed from the Agricultural Commissioner in improving prospects for regional New South Wales, and that was a report that was developed in 2021. The 13th recommendation from that report is to establish a council reference group, which is what this is all about, and we've named it Paddock to Planning. And it's about bringing everyone together to share their experiences on agricultural land use conflict. So there's 4 things that it's intended to achieve, and it's about sharing a knowledge and having councils share with each other how they've been dealing with land use conflict issues and some ideas for resolution. Bring in agricultural experts. So if you have any ideas on agricultural experts that you'd like to hear from or present in this forum, then please let us know through the wall that we'll provide a link to in a little while. Yeah, providing input to our latest projects. So yeah, the information that you provide us will help us refine our policies and guidelines, etc. We also have provide training opportunities. So Selena Stillman will talk about this a little bit more in another presentation after this. And finally, yeah, inputting into our work, New South Wales DPI work. So how it will be run is there'll be 3 forums held over a 12-month period and looking at possibly about 4 months apart. Those forums will be reviewed after the 3rd one, and we'll decide whether to continue or not, whether they're of value to everyone. And we'll also be providing a feedback survey after each forum so that helps us tailor the forums for your purposes. They're all held via Zoom, so it's easy for people to log in. And it's an open format discussing land use conflict issues and how they can be resolved. So we'll break out into groups this afternoon, later in the agenda, and we'll discuss those issues. And that ends my presentation, and I'll pass over to Tamara Prentice, who will provide you information on the Rural Land Use Strategy Guideline and also the State Significant Strategic Agricultural Land.
Thanks, Wendy. And thanks again, everyone, for joining us. I'm hoping most of you will be aware that DPI have recently released a Rural Land Strategy Guide. This guide came again from the Agricultural Commissioner's consultation. What he found was that councils were seeking more advice from state government around how to plan for agricultural land, and particularly seeking more support as well, so that when council staff particularly were making recommendations, they had something that they could sort of point to and rely on as a bit of a source of information. So basically we prepared this guide with the basis of trying to provide councils supporting evidence to strengthen rural planning decisions, and also to help any emerging planners, anyone new to the fraternity, to understand the needs of agriculture as opposed to those of the rural landscape more generally. Next slide, please, Helen. The Rural Land Strategy, it provides guidance to councils through some summary provisions which say council should. And the premise of that is that it's a guidance document. It doesn't have statutory weighting, but it's sort of meant to be an indicative start for people to start thinking their planning through from. some of the key points that are in this guide that I just thought I'd touch on today are around the production chain. So thinking about things like chicken processing plants, for example, have to be within 2 hours of grower farms just for animal welfare reasons. Similarly, across every agricultural industry, there's supply chains, inputs and outputs that, you know, generally get sort of overlooked a little bit. And so it would be good to have a bit of a discussion or think about that in preparing your RLS. The next is around intensive ag production. Intensive ag production areas, there's an increasing population, so we need to increase food production on the same or a smaller amount of land over time as well. So there's going to be an ongoing increase in the types of intensive and protected cropping. So thinking about that within your council area and how you can ensure that there's spaces for those to occur. The next point that I've got here is around the RU1 primary production zone. So there was a lot of calls during the Agricultural Commissioner's work for an agricultural zone. We didn't think that that was necessary. We thought potentially the RU1 zone could work for that purpose if it wasn't diluted. So what we're calling for here is that RU1 zone is actually used for primary production purposes, that the landscape is potentially broken up into areas for actual production and then areas which might serve the other uses that the rural landscape is necessary for, green breaks, rural res expansion, those types of things. So it's just trying to diversify the landscape a little bit to support agriculture intergenerationally. And then the last one I've pulled out is around housing. And so basically council all do housing strategies, there's housing targets, but the rural landscape doesn't necessarily form the best place for those to be placed, difficult to service, and also then provide a point of land use conflict. So it's just to give some support for housing to be primarily within the residential areas, and the rural land strategies to consider agriculture in terms of a first priority with the housing as potentially secondary subordinate to that. A bit of a side note, we sent this guide out to a few councils to comment on before we released it, and there was a fair bit of talk about MLS. Understand that it's very much a key contentious issue, and we've actually, we're working with the University of Sydney to do a whole bulk of research in that space probably next year. So we haven't touched as much on MLS as we would have liked, but as you can understand, it's super contentious and going to take a lot of work for us to be able to provide some sort of contemporary advice in that space. So it is an upcoming piece of research that we will do. But yeah, please forgive us for not having it in this early version. So Helen's got a poll on the screen for us. I'm going to say it's the best thing since sliced bread. I hope you all think the same, but pretty keen to hear your feedback about that, and we'll review it as necessary as well based on your advice. And I'm really grateful you've come to this session, and hope that you know, we can get some advice from you to better tailor both our input to cabinet submissions and other departments, as well as our own future planning advice. So the next point I just wanted to touch upon, and I thought I briefly saw a chat question come up about this, is the preparation of statewide ag land use planning strategy still proposed? We might come back to that one. Sorry. So this one's about the state significant ag land mapping. So yeah, it's still underway at the moment. We've received and reviewed all of the submissions from the first exhibition, and we're grateful to everyone that made submissions. We're proposing to re-exhibit mid to late October, and accompanying that re-exhibition will be a draft policy that explains how we think the map should be used as well. So I'm happy to receive feedback and hopeful of receiving feedback. My lights just went out because I didn't move. Yeah, during that exhibition period. So some of the key things we're looking at, we've asked councils to provide us with their urban growth area boundary data sets if you have any. So if you've got that email, please send us your data, because we don't want to map your approved UGAs as SSAL. It would just be complex for all of us. So please, if you've got that email, we'd really love that data. And we'll also release a submissions report with the second exhibition as well. So that'll just explain how we've considered various things and how we've improved the map. So hopefully it'll be a much better version than the first one, but we had to start somewhere, and we're really grateful to government for getting that first version out for us. And I'm personally super excited about that.
Thank you, Helen. And yeah, it's great to see everyone at this forum this morning. It's a great opportunity for us all to catch up and link together, and also a great opportunity for me to share an update on our agricultural land use planning education program, which is about to roll out, and is very exciting for our team, and we hope you think the same. So next slide, please, Helen. And so our education program stems from one of the recommendations also within the New South Wales Ag Commissioner's report, but it's also something I think that we've all felt has been needed for quite a while, and we certainly get queries from local council in terms of, is there training available on certain topics, and so we hope to be able to provide some of that. So the recommendation within the report was for DPI in partnership with other government agencies and organisations should implement programs for yourselves as council planners and other council staff, councillors and the wider public about agricultural land use planning and those planning instruments that support agriculture. So the objectives of this program is to increase the knowledge and understanding of agriculture and agricultural land use planning, and hopefully that will provide improved confidence in strategically planning for ag and also in assessing intensive agricultural developments. So similar to this particular forum, the hope is that through that education program, that it's a great opportunity for yourselves to learn from each other and share experiences, for us to provide some industry personnel and expertise to some of those training opportunities, and also to think about some of the issues and how we can all work together about tackling those and looking at ways forward to address some of those issues. So I'd like to thank you all for those that participated in our survey that we sent out some time ago in relation to whether there was a need for training and information resources around ag and ag land use planning. And also, if there was, how we should deliver that and what are the most relevant topics that people are interested in. So these were the 6 key themes you may remember from that survey. And unsurprisingly, land use conflict came out as number 1. So as I will talk about soon, that will be the first of a number of topics that we roll out. These were some of the other topics of interest that you indicated you'd be interested in information, and as we go through the program, we hope to provide some information on some and hopefully as many as we can of these. So as I said, we'll be offering, we'll be working with other agencies and industry, and some of you have already been involved in providing input to scoping this program, which we thank you very much for that, to provide a blended program of information. So we'll be looking at online courses, COVID permitting, we hope to have some face-to-face workshops and other information resources that we'll provide on our website. Just to launch this at this program, this is our very first one that will be off the books, which is a course in risk management in the context of land use conflict. So this is more some formal training. We had some input from some of yourselves around some value in actually having a nationally recognised unit of competency. So this will be a diploma level unit, and it's about a 10 to 12 hour commitment. We hope to cover 4 online modules around risk management in the context of land use conflict, and we hope to actually do our pilot course at the end of this year, and we'll use that pilot course to really refine that course and ensure that it's fit for purpose and it meets your needs, and we'll use a number of scenarios within that. So that's probably all to share with you. Hopefully we'll share some more updates at future forums. But if you're interested in undertaking the pilot course or future courses, please get in contact. I'll provide some information and some contact details within the chat. So thank you very much, and I'll hand back to Helen.
Thank you, Sel. Yeah, we've just popped a quick poll up there just to gauge interest in whether you'd like to participate in the ED program. As Sel mentioned, it'll be launching later this year. Obviously, the way the year's going, that year's going to wrap up pretty soon, so it will be run next year as well, and also the ongoing programs that will be developed later in the year. So I'd like to pass now on to Wendy to launch into the land use conflict breakout room component. Oh, sorry, the questions.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. Yeah, it looks like we've got a few questions coming up in the chat, which is great. So if you have questions on what you've heard with the presentations or other questions, please put them in the chat, and we've got a 15-minute segment here to answer those questions. So I'll go to the first question from Matt Rose. The preparation of a statewide agricultural land use planning strategy still proposed? I'll refer to Tamara.
Yeah, yeah, look, Matt, I love that question. I would really love to have a statewide ag planning strategy, and since I've started with DPI, it's very much something I've advocated for. Look, I was talking to our directors and executive about it only in the last couple of weeks, and what I'd hope, like we're not currently doing it at the moment. We're pretty flat out on the SSAL mapping. Once we've got that done, we've got a couple of other projects, but I really want to do a strategy in the background, but really keen to have a chat with you actually afterwards, if I can have some ideas from you about what you'd like in that, because I'm really keen to have one as well, just to give us a lot more guidance about what material we can provide and how we can be stronger in our responses as well. So definitely on my agenda, but yeah, keen to have a chat with you so we can potentially, you know, get a good outcome for you as well.
Great, thanks for that, Tamara. I have another question from Alex McVean. In coordinating the Mid-Coast Rural Strategy, I've spoken to numerous landowners who are not aware of the SAL project and are frustrated, asking when DPI will consult and engage with landowners and primary producers.
Yeah, so thanks again, Alex, for that. And there's a couple of questions I can see about SSAL in there. So look, we've met with New South Wales farmers and we have, you know, tried to advertise the SAL project on all of the forums that we have available. We just can't contact everyone that owns a property across the state. It's just not viable. The intention of the SAL mapping project is to identify lands for councils to consider in undertaking their planning. So while it would be good to have some feedback from landowners who are aware, I also think it's probably more valid that councils have a look at it and see if, you know, what they think from their point of view. There's a heap of questions in there about inaccuracies in the mapping. Completely appreciate that. I looked at a site yesterday that was inaccurate as well, but we used the best available data that we had within the time frame that we had for the first map, and we really wanted to find out if there was other data sets that we should be using and how we could better fix that data. So you'll be aware that it was a preliminary first draft. It was quite an early version that we put out, and we're really hopeful that the next version will be a bit more accurate. So hopefully it will be, and if not, again, like, it's the next draft, so happy to try, and we're very much going to try and fix it again for the third crack at it. In terms of the GSC and the GCC, we have been talking with both the Greater Sydney Commission and the Cities now the Greater Cities Commission as well. Not quite sure what we're going to do with the MRA. I know that there's some areas of the MRA that are identified for urban release as well. But yeah, very keen to have a bit of interaction there. And initially, one of our layers was to include the MRA as SSAL. We took that out because the MRA included some townships from memory as well, so it wouldn't have worked. But we're very much still thinking about how we sort of do that, how we interact the two. There's some quite poor land as well in the MRA from an agricultural production perspective, so some of the councils in the MRA sort of recommended against it too. It's a bit of a difficult one. In terms of North Coast, that's really interesting because we did use the existing North Coast mapping, so not sure if the inaccuracies resulted from the earlier mapping or from the data sets we used, but we're having a bit of a think about that, and we'll probably contact the North Coast councils as well about their thoughts on incorporating the old mapping or whether we just rely on our biophysical mapping now. That's a policy decision that we're going to have to make, so pretty keen to understand a bit more about that inaccuracy, Alex. I think that's probably our conservation areas. We excluded C2 because its primary purpose is conservation, and we knew it had been applied fairly sparingly. We purposely included C3 just because there is a bit of interaction between the C3 and ag uses. And because C2 should have picked up your really high value conservation lands. But if that's a concern, again, we'll have another bit of a think about that as well. I think that's most of the SSAL. Dungog Council, not aware of it. Can we do more comms and engagement to target LGAs? What we can do is send out a bit of an update. We are proposing to send out another update on SSAL. So if you guys have ways you can get that out into your communities, we'd appreciate that as well. We've got some capacity to do things on Facebook and Twitter and the like, but it just doesn't reach a lot of the people. So anything that you can do to help would be much appreciated in that respect.
Great, thanks for that, Tamara. There's also a question on the liaison between with DPE and the revised agritourism proposals. If you'd like to comment on that.
Yeah, so we've been dealing with DPE since inception of some of the agritourism work. We've had some fairly terse discussions, we've had some fairly agreeable discussions, but it's been fairly, it's been fairly extended. DPE obviously are the regulator in that space, so we can try and influence, but we ultimately don't make the final decision. So our two ministers now have been talking about particular things, the number of people per day on a farm for farm picking or at a time on farm for farm picking, and we think we've resolved most of the issues, but if you've got particular concerns, I'd be really happy to hear them, because that's the type of information we need from you to understand where we can better advocate to reflect council's needs in the agricultural space. And one of the key things with agritourism is it an agricultural use or is it a tourism use? And I have it from planning at the very, very high levels that they are actually proposing that these things will be supportive of agriculture, not tourism operators. How that works, I'm not quite sure, but anyway, we have had some involvement. Sorry, that was a long answer to a short question.
Great, thanks. There's a couple of questions on future funding opportunities in preparing rural land use strategies.
Okay, yeah, and look, I actually hadn't considered that, but I was just trying to think through where we've got opportunities to get funding, and I can't say yes because we don't have any money, but what we can try and do, and I'd be really keen to use probably some of this chat as evidence if it's okay with you, we could potentially ask for funding from government to help councils do their RLSs to be able to support ag as an engine industry in most of the REDs, or most of the regional economic development strategies. But yeah, really keen, again, like that information from you guys that you need that type of support is really helpful for us in then putting a brief up to government to say, actually, this is what councils need. So yeah, this is what I get for not being in council for 10 years. Please forgive me, but yeah, really keen to try and pursue that as well. And if you're okay, I'll happily use some of the questions coming through this as support, or emails if you want to send them as support for that proposition as well.
Great, thanks. And there's a question for you, Selena, about qualifications necessary for preparing land use risk assessment. Several consultants preparing proposals have asked that actual question.
Yeah, well, I think the current guideline talks about some ability in terms of assessing, environment, like having some environmental qualifications around that. With our actual education program, we're looking, our land use conflict program or formal training that we're about to commence actually goes through the LUCA process. And because the LUCA process follows that risk assessment framework, we hope that through that, people will be able to, assess whether assess the adequacy of the LUCRAs that they're actually receiving. And yeah, it is something that we've talked about in terms of that program, whether there's some way that we can put some more rigor into who actually undertakes those LUCRAs. But at this stage, yeah, if you have some qualifications around environmental science or that element, then yeah, the current LUCRA says, as long as you can do that assessment, then that's okay.
Great, thanks for that, Sel. There's a question on the rural land strategy again, about if a rural land strategy was developed that predates those guidelines, is there a preference for that to be reviewed? And there's another comment after that talks about the regional ag land use strategies would be more beneficial.
Yeah, so we don't have any requirement for strategies to be reviewed acknowledging council's resourcing risks, unless and until councils are up to doing a review anyway. So certainly not being forced on anyone. And in terms of a regional scale strategy. Yeah, look, we've just recently last year or the year before released agricultural snapshots for each of the regions, which should have set out what your top 5 agricultural industries were and how you can best plan for them. So I'm not sure if you're all familiar with those, but hopefully they'll be of some assistance. And we were proposing to develop them into a fairly, a bit more of a robust document on the next review as well. So yeah, pretty keen to know whether you have seen those or not and whether they're helpful. So yeah, keen to do that. There was a couple of comments about a one-size-fit-all. So look, we're aware of that. The RLS guide is, as I said, only guidance, and in some cases it's not going to be applicable. There's obviously key differences between some of the Western councils and some of the needs of the Eastern councils. So take them as a bit of a guidance document, and then do the work that you need to do. Hopefully there's enough documentation in there to say, if you do this strategy or this study and you find blah, then go away and do blah or whatever it is to make it actually then work for your LGA. But if there's areas that you think don't, let us know, and on the next revision we can try and make it so that it can actually tailor a bit better for the unique needs of some of the other LGAs.
Right,
there's a lot of
there's actually a question about including regenerative agriculture at the landscape scale.
I love that. Yeah, DPI have actually released a new strategic plan in the last couple of months that changes our view from economic performance to 6 strategic priorities, one of which is how we have a clean and functional landscape. DPI actually includes components of fisheries as well, and sometimes there's conflicts between how we're managing the landscape and the impact it's having on fisheries resources too, and the estuaries. We also administer some of the climate change research and some of the clean coastal catchments work too. So really keen, DPI are really keen to change our outlook to look at sustainable and productive resources. So, and also start looking at some of that regenerative ag work as well. So a bit of a new change in direction for us, and one that sort of post-dated the release of the RLS strategy, but we can include something like that in the next review. And you'll probably see a bit of a change in how we're sort of responding to things in that manner going forward too.
Fantastic. We've got a lot of questions coming through, which is brilliant.
We might move on to the breakout rooms if possible, Wendy.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So we'll move on to the breakout rooms, and you'll all be transferred to a breakout room. And 2 questions that we'll be discussing in those breakout rooms are up on the screen there. So what land use conflict issue does your council find to be the most challenging and why? What is the one land use conflict issue you would like to discuss at future forums? So if you could assist us there, that would be fantastic. There will be a lead person in each breakout room. And after the discussion forum, which is 15 minutes, you'll be automatically transferred back to the main group.
Sure. So
you don't have to do anything.
Okay. Just with that, we've unfortunately just got a couple of people with connection issues from DPI. So if there happens to not be a DPI representative in your room, we do ask if someone could please volunteer for us. That'd be great. All right, I'll put you all in your rooms. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully you had some good conversations there. I hate to cut you off in the middle of some of those topics. We do apologise that we have got some connection issues with some of our team members there, but we do encourage everyone just to go into the ideas wall. So we just put together a bit of a word cloud of some of the key things that popped out in the discussions there. So obviously a lot of talk about the RU1 zone and using that. Plenty of discussion about buffers and the use of buffers, more guidance on those. That is one of another project that was recommended by the Agricultural Commissioner's report, and the DPI are working on doing that one at the moment. But we do encourage everybody to just jump on the wall and have a look at those. If you didn't get a chance to have a say in your groups, that given the time that we have, we do encourage you to just pop some extra ones there. We will wrap up all the comments and so forth in a report and put those out to you, and will also help us formalise the future forums going forward and get some solutions or ideas on how we can address the land use conflict issues right across the state. We do know that regions differ, and obviously councils differ depending on the issue. So it's not a one size fits all, but if we can have some similar approaches, it will certainly help the situation there. We'll also send you a feedback survey. If you could kindly fill this out, we'll be able to help respond to some of these issues a little bit more there as well. So I'll just see if Wendy's on board. Wendy, were you able to reconnect? Don't believe Wendy was able to reconnect there. So we'd just like to thank everybody. It was a huge effort. We were really overwhelmed with the interest, and we'll definitely take away all the input and that you've provided us today, and tailor the future forums going forward. As Wendy mentioned earlier, we're hoping to run 3 in a 12-month period that will really target some of these areas. And so we'll put those invites out later, and November is when we're looking at the next one. So I'd like to thank the DPI staff that helped out there, and the volunteers in the breakout rooms that stepped in for us there. And so yeah, we'd like to finish the recording and finish the meeting here, and thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.